Welcome to the F1 Blog's YouTube channel, The Deep Dive. You know, the Formula One world was absolutely buzzing when Lewis Hamilton announced his move to Ferrari.
Oh, definitely. The Tifosi went wild.
Exactly. And everyone was just so eager to see how this, well, legendary driver would actually fare in the iconic red car.
Yep.
Well, we're now 5 races into the 2025 season, and today we're taking a really close look at how that transition has actually unfolded.
Right. And we've been digging into an in-depth analysis right here on F1 Blogs that, really dissects Hamilton's performance in these first few races.
Okay.
Especially looking at his adaptation to the Ferrari and how he's stacking up against his teammate LECLERC.
So what's the plan for this deep dive?
Well, our mission today really is to pull out the key insights, try to understand the challenges Hamilton's actually facing, and maybe get a sense of what the future might hold.
And hopefully without getting too lost in the super technical stuff.
That's the idea. Keep it focused on the driving and the adaptation story.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Coming into the season, the expectations were just sky high, weren't they?
Absolutely. Hamilton, 7-time champion, joining Ferrari.
Yeah.
It felt like a potential dream team scenario.
5 events in, and the reality seems, well, a bit more complicated.
It does. We've definitely seen flashes of promise, yeah. But the overall trend, if you look at it, seems to be Hamilton running behind LECLERC more often than not.
And it's worth remembering those first 5 Grands Prix were crammed into just 6 weekends. That's a pretty intense start.
Super intense. No real breathing room. And the F1 Blogs analysis, it actually points to a pretty encouraging start back in Australia.
Right, I remember that. He finished 10th after starting 8th.
Exactly. And yeah, maybe a late rain strategy call cost him a couple of spots, but it was, a solid beginning.
So what did the analysis pick up on from that race specifically?
Interestingly, F1 Blogs highlighted the main area where he was losing time to LECLERC. It was through those 2 quick right-handers. Turns 6 and 13. LECLERC was just consistently carrying more speed through there.
Okay, so early signs of maybe LECLERC being more comfortable in certain types of corners.
Potentially, yeah. Then we get to China, which, wow, that looked like a real turning point.
Oh yeah, pole position for the sprint race.
And then he won it. His first victory in Ferrari colors, even if it was the sprint.
Huge moment. Plus, he outqualified LECLERC for the main Grand Prix too.
He did. That sprint win, it really felt significant, didn't it? Like maybe he was properly finding his rhythm with the car.
Yeah, hopes were definitely high after that Saturday.
For sure. China was, without doubt, the high watermark so far. F1 Blogs noted it was a front-limited circuit, hadn't fully gripped up, seemed to suit him.
But then came Sunday.
Right. As F1 Blogs points out, the race day pace, well, it told a different story. Hamilton was lapping slower than LECLERC.
Did they figure out why?
The team suspected a setup error might have been to blame. Of course, both drivers ended up disqualified anyway.
Ah, yes, the plank wear for Hamilton and LECLERC's car being underweight.
Exactly. But even before all that, there were signs Hamilton wasn't quite as comfortable in race trim. The F1 Blogs data suggests maybe a slight difference in tire management.
Or maybe exploiting the engine mapping on long runs.
Could be. Something LECLERC seems to have, pretty much mastered in this Ferrari.
Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag in China.
Sure.
Promise, then some question marks.
Definitely. And then we moved on to a run of races that, frankly, seemed increasingly frustrating for Hamilton.
Japan comes to mind. He mentioned struggling with understeer in qualifying.
He did. And just didn't seem to have the pace to match LECLERC in the race itself.
And was there something about the car, maybe ride height issues because of bottoming?
Yeah, he hinted at a potential issue there related to ride height compromises. So building on those setup questions from China,
right?
This understeer in Japan, where the front just doesn't want to turn in it, seems like another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
The team trying to get him fully comfortable with the car's handling.
It's fascinating how these things link up. What about the upgrades? Ferrari brought a floor upgrade in Bahrain, right?
They did. And the analysis on F1 Blogs notes this was meant to bring more downforce. These ground effect cars, they're so sensitive to airflow under the car.
And ride height, obviously. Needs a different approach compared to the older cars.
Totally. And while the upgrade did bring more downforce, Hamilton apparently still reported difficulties, especially in the high-speed corners.
Echoing some of the rear stability issues he sometimes had at Mercedes?
Seems like it, yeah. He even admitted after qualifying in Bahrain, where he was over half a second slower than LECLERC, that he was not doing a good job.
Ouch. But wait, Bahrain wasn't all bad, was it? I thought his race pace improved later on.
Ah, good point. Yes, his pace in the second stint on the medium tires was actually quite encouraging. He seemed to feel like he'd made a bit of a breakthrough.
So he felt he'd learned something about how to drive it.
That's what he suggested, yeah. Expressed some optimism. But that optimism didn't quite carry over to Saudi Arabia.
Ah, what happened there?
Well, F1 Blogs rightly calls that weekend bitterly disappointing for him. His minimum speed through the corners was significantly down compared to LECLERC.
How much down?
Well, he was over half a second slower again in qualifying, and he described the race itself as horrible. Just no grip, no balance.
Wow, that's tough. And this leads us to something concerning highlighted in the F1 Blogs analysis.
The qualifying gap.
Yeah, it isn't shrinking. If anything, it seems to be, well, expanding. Why is that happening?
This is where it gets really interesting, digging into driving style and these current cars. Hamilton's traditional style,
Late and hard on the brakes.
Exactly. Load up the front tires, use the rear rotation to help turn the car. It's incredibly effective when the car allows for that pitch and roll.
But these ground effect cars,
they run super low, very stiff, limited ride height movement for aero reasons. And that style, well, it just doesn't seem to suit them quite as well.
So it demands a fundamental shift in technique.
Pretty much. F1 Blogs really emphasizes that LECLERC adapted much quicker to this generation of cars.
He changed his braking style earlier on.
He did, yeah. And he's clearly figured out how to maximize their potential. Hamilton still, it seems, in that adaptation process.
Plus, he had the brake change, too, didn't he?
Right. Switching to Brembo after years with carbon industry at Mercedes. And he's always been known for being incredibly sensitive to braking feel. That just adds another layer.
Meanwhile, it sounds like LECLERC is really getting the Ferrari working for him.
Yeah, the analysis mentions he's become increasingly comfortable, especially noted after that Japanese Grand Prix. He seems much more at one with it.
Which translates to performance, obviously.
It does, but it's important context, as F1 Blogs points out. Even when LECLERC is absolutely nailing it, the Ferrari still seems to be generally maybe 2 or 3 tenths off the ultimate pace.
Which explains why he's only had one top 3 qualifying result so far.
Exactly. It shows the car itself is still, let's say, a bit tricky. It's not just plug and play, so there's definitely room for Hamilton to improve as he gets more familiar.
And what has Hamilton himself said about LECLERC's driving?
He's noted LECLERC seems comfortable with a bit more oversteer, but interestingly, Hamilton also said his own data analysis shows his driving style isn't massively different. He's just slower in the corners right now.
Slower in the corners. That's the crux of it. So what's the team saying? Is Fred Verse getting twitchy?
Publicly?
Right.
Not at all. According to F1 Blogs, team principal Fred Verse has been really vocal with his support. Said he backs Hamilton 2,000%.
Okay, strong words.
Yeah, it suggests they still see this as, normal growing pains. A new driver, new team, new car philosophy.
And Hamilton himself, he sort of dismissed the idea that the gap before Miami was some big reset opportunity.
Yeah, he did. Played it down. But the analysis does raise a fair concern.
Which is?
Well, if this pattern continues, Hamilton consistently trailing LECLERC deep into the season, past the halfway point maybe?
Then the questions get bigger.
Exactly. Then you start wondering if it's a more significant struggle to adapt. Maybe, echoes of Daniel Ricciardo's difficulties with certain cars in the past.
That's a sobering comparison. So for now, the narrative is adaptation, but the clock is ticking somewhat.
I think that's fair. The pressure is definitely mounting for him to start closing that performance gap.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Thinking about everything we've discussed, drawing from that F1 Blogs analysis, what are the main takeaways on Hamilton's first 5 races with Ferrari?
I think the main points are pretty clear, right? Hamilton's start has definitely been more challenging than perhaps many expected.
For sure.
We've seen flashes, yes, but consistently he's been behind LECLERC. And the analysis from F1 Blogs really suggests it's a mix of factors.
Like adapting his driving style.
Yeah, adapting his renowned style to these ground effect cars, getting used to the new brakes, plus the simple fact that LECLERC is already deeply integrated and performing well with this Ferrari.
And that qualifying gap is the big headline figure right now.
It is. It's a concern. But as we said, the team is publicly very supportive, framing it as an adaptation period. For now.
So the big question then, for you, the viewer watching on F1 Blogs, is really this. Will Lewis Hamilton successfully adapt? Can he tweak that driving style, fully gel with this Ferrari, and start closing that gap to LECLERC?
And become a consistent frontrunner again?
Or are we actually witnessing the start of a more significant maybe longer-term struggle for him to master these current cars.
What factors are going to be key? Car development, Hamilton's adjustments, team dynamics.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch how this story unfolds over the rest of the season.
In conclusion, yeah, these initial races paint a complex picture. Moments of brilliance, yes, but that consistent edge over LECLERC, it just hasn't quite materialized yet.
The F1 blog's insights really highlight those challenges, adapting, the driving, the car philosophy.
It's the ground effect era. The upcoming races, they're going to be crucial in showing whether he can bridge this gap and really fulfill those huge expectations that came with the move.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive here on F1 Blogs. If you enjoyed this analysis and you want to keep up with all the latest F1 news and our in-depth discussions,
Make sure you subscribe.
yeah, subscribe to the F1 Blogs YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video. We'll see you down in the comments.